Mac here again. Now I use a couple of QNAP NASs. They're great devices, really functional, and they do tons of stuff, and they just sit on a shelf and I forget about them. I've got this one, which is a 453BT3, which has 10 gig interface in it as well as Thunderbolt 3. I've also got another one which is a smaller similar unit, which I just use for backups, which is this model here. Now I have the same problem on both. The drives don't spin down, so they're constantly active all the time. They just never spin down regardless of what I set in the admin center. Rather foolishly perhaps, assume that this would be relatively straightforward to fix and it would just be a setting in the configuration somewhere. Oh, how wrong I was. As soon as I got over to Google and started having a look at this, I realized what a can of worms I'd opened, and there was so much happening around this same sort of issue. But what I will say is I found a process that seems to work for my units, and it is reliable and it works every single time. Now, a couple of downsides. You have to do this from the SSH console, so you have to know how that works. Also, the changes that I've added, or that I'm going to show you in a second, they don't survive a reboot. Every time I reboot these units, which to be fair is not very often, I have to apply the same settings again. If I don't, the units don't spin down and I have the same issue. It's not particularly critical, it's not a massive problem, and some people would argue that you're better off leaving the drives spinning all the time. And I kind of get that argument. But as soon as I knew this problem was there, it's been irritating me ever since. So let me show you how I've gone about sorting out this problem on my particular units. So let's go look at our NAS. So the unit we're going to work on today, this is the 453BT3 unit. So this is the one that has the 10 gig interface in it and also the Thunderbolt 3 connections. It's running the latest firmware, 452.15.66, and I've also upgraded this one to 16 gig of RAM. Now in terms of drives, this currently has 4 Western Digital 8TB gold in there, I think. The other unit has 4 12TB Ironwolf Pro units in there. Different drives, but the solution works on both. Now to enter the commands, we do need to connect to the unit using SSH. So the first thing you'll need to do is make sure that's turned on. So if you go into your control panel like I am here, if you check down there, you'll see an option for Telnet and SSH. Just make sure that it is enabled there. And of course you need to make sure that your admin account is enabled as well, because we'll need to log in using that account. So let's go now, we'll connect to it with SSH and we'll be able to look at the commands that you need. Okay, let's get connected to our NAS over SSH. I have an emulator here which will allow me to connect. It's that one. I'm just going to connect to it. It'll ask me for my password. There we go. Now if it takes you to this main menu, you can just Q to quit out of it and we'll be back in the shell. Now the first thing we need to do is work out the device references for the drives in your unit. My unit has 6 drives in, so I need to work out which drives that I want to actually modify. So of course it's only the spinning drives that I'm interested in. The command we're going to use for all of this is this one, hdparm. If you do it, you'll see that there's a ton of options in here. So what we're going to do first is use this one, the I, to work out what our device references are. So it's pretty easy. I'm going to start with device SDA. Now typically they go A upwards, so I'm expecting A and B to be my SSD. So we can see there, the first one is my SSD. Let me just make this window slightly larger. We'll go with B, which I'm expecting to be the SSD as well. Yes it is, that's a Western Digital one. And I'm expecting my spinning drives then to be C, D, E, and F. There we go. What we're going to do, we're going to use this command as well to modify some of the parameters of the drive. So what's really interesting is there are 3 commands per drive that we need to use. Now if I leave any of them out, the spinning down doesn't happen. But if I include all of them, all 3 of them for every single drive, it works as expected. As to why that happens, I'm not sure. It's a little bit confusing, but what I do know is it's repeatable and it works every time as long as I do this after a fresh boot. So let me show you what these commands are. The first command we're going to use is this option, which is -B, that one there, set advanced power management settings. Now I'm going to paste the commands in for my 4 drives, and again I will put these commands in the description for you. So I've set the power management level to 100. I will say that I've tried various numbers varying from 50 up to 255. It doesn't seem to make any difference what I put in here. What is important is that I put something in here. If I don't put anything, this doesn't work, which is really odd. The next option we're going to do for the same drives then is the -S version, which is this. This is setting a standby or a spin down timeout. Now just to be clear, the time that we enter here seems to be ignored by the NAS, but it seems to get overwritten by whatever we define in the management shell. But like I say, if I don't include these commands, the unit doesn't spin down. So I'm going to now paste in the option for those drives. That's there, and again these commands will be in the description. So I've just set it to an arbitrary value of, let's have a look, 3 minutes and 20 seconds from the look of it. So the final command is -y, which is this one here, which apparently forces the drives to sleep. Now I will say, having the NAS next to me, actually entering this command doesn't seem to do that. It doesn't force the drives to sleep immediately, but like I say, if I don't include these commands when I do the setup after a reboot, the units do not spin down. So I'm going to enter them now for all of those 4 drives. There we go. That's all done. That's all of our stuff in SSH done now, so I can close that down. There is one final thing we need to do, and we need to jump back into the web interface. So I'm just going to pull it up here. Now, if you go into your control panel again, you want to select the hardware option here. Now you'll see here that I have a 5-minute standby time already set, but what I need to do is unset it, apply, reset it for the time that you want, and then click apply again. So as you can see, it is a little bit involved, and now as I've said, doesn't seem to survive a reboot either, which is one of those annoying things. But then again, I think, well, I don't often reboot these units anyway, and if I forget to do it, it's not the end of the world. One thing you can do though is you can actually define a process during startup. Now I haven't done this as yet, but I was planning on testing to see whether I can actually just put all these commands in a startup script and see whether that sorts the issue as well. I thought I'd monitor this for a bit longer just to see whether I have any other results from it, but so far it seems to be working just fine. Now I also have power meters plugged into these units, so I was interested to compare the before and after just to see if it actually does make any real difference beyond just the noise of the devices operating. And what I found is, before I made the changes, the unit was averaging about £72 a year to operate. After the changes, which to be fair, I've only really monitored over a week, but I have been, using them typically the way that I would normally, that annual cost drops to about £53 a week. So that's probably about a 26% drop in operational cost for the unit. I think that's not too shabby, and to be honest, I was more interested in actually getting this particular feature working because I noticed that it wasn't working, which I found highly irritating. Now I'm going to finish up there. Like I say, I'll put the commands in the description below. I'd love to hear input on how other people have solved this problem, and also of course whether those commands, whether there's a simpler version of achieving this, and of course whether there's a way I can automate it at boot. So yeah, drop your comment below. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Thanks.